Mr. Sanis, let me ask you, were you a scared, reluctant Army volunteer draftee in July 1965?
Yes.
Were you a dedicated inductee into the National Security Agency?
Absolutely, yes.
Were you an NSA counterintelligence agent in Vietnam?
Yes, for 3 tours.
Were you an NSA electronic eavesdropper on the CIA's dirty wars in Southeast Asia?
Yes.
Were you an aerospace company engineer and then a designer and builder of nightclubs and restaurants who was an anti-war activist?
Yes.
Were you America's mole inside FBI bombing and obstruction of justice plots?
I was indeed.
Were you the whistleblower who alerted the American public to the criminal conduct of the FBI and the cover-up by the U.S. Department of Justice headed by John Mitchell?
At all relevant times in this discourse, that was my motive, that was my objective, that was my plan, and that's what I carried out.
Were you the man who forced the convening of a federal grand jury to hear his unimmunized testimony to FBI-directed participation in conspiracies to commit bombing, felony murder, and multiple counts of obstruction of justice?
Yes, on June 20th, 1972, according to my criminal attorney, I voluntarily confessed without immunization to more than 800 years worth of minimum sentences, if staged consecutively, worth of crimes on behalf of the Federal Bureau of Investigations, operations to smear anti-war movement individuals, to smear racial minorities, and to smear people who were opposed to the Republican re-election of Richard Milhouse Nixon.
Mr. Sanis, were you the man whose sworn affidavits were utilized in the quashing of 37 federal felony indictments?
I am that man.
And, Mr. Sanis, were you the man who was instrumental in obtaining the public confessions of 2 other men who had been bombers for the FBI?
I was. One of them I took away from the FBI safe house in Ballard, a suburb or an area of the city of Seattle, Washington. And that was Desmond Jeffrey Paul, who had carried out several bombings on behalf of the FBI. In October of 1970, by going to the offices of the defense groups that were assisting, and I'd gone there many times before, in the guise of a fundraiser for these 3 groups,
Okay.
which is the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. At that time, I knew when I gave him those files in the second meeting that I was dealing with the FBI, but not the FBI field office that I'd been doing espionage work for in Seattle prior to that time. I knew this was a separate and distinct operation, and it was only nearly 2 years later that I found out that the man who was a senior FBI agent from Washington, D.C. was not an FBI agent. He was a counterintelligence agent for Richard Milhouse Nixon's White House Plumbers group. He was E. Howard Hunt. And I knew this only after two, if I remember correctly, of the four Watergate burglars on the night of June 16th, 1972, had entered into the offices of Lawrence O'Brien, been arrested as the Watergate burglars, as I'll elaborate on a little later, and had in two of their pockets the name E. Howard Hunt with his White House telephone number. And he was implicated in the Watergate burglary as a leader of it, along with G. Gordon Liddy. But I only knew his real name about over a year and a half later, when that information came out of Watergate. I was not surprised that I'd been not dealing with a man operating under his own name, because he had asked me to undertake a criminal enterprise for him on behalf of the federal government.
Mr. Sanas, tell me about the March 8th, 1971 burglary of over 800 secret documents from the Medea, Pennsylvania office of the FBI.
That burglary, that break-in, that theft of FBI documents was for the purpose of implicating, by their own words, by their own documents, J. Edgar Hoover's Federal Bureau of Investigations organization in criminal activities that they were undertaking, to my knowledge, to my direct knowledge, and to my direct involvement in attacking the anti-Vietnam War movement and its members, and in attacking people who were in favor of minority rights in this country.